Jan Walski was a 71-year-old Polish peasant living in Emelsin, a small village in Poland. On May 10, 1975, Walski was driving his horse-drawn carriage through the woods near Emelsin. It was a normal trip for the most part, that is, until Walski came across a pair of small green men. Initially, Walski confused the strange beings for foreigners due to their facial characteristics. But the strangers then climbed into Walski's carriage with him and began talking to him in a strange language. And that was when Walski knew he was dealing with something out of this world. However, rather than being alarmed, Walski cheerfully allowed the men to ride with him for some distance. After some time, the trio came upon a large spacecraft hovering in the field. The craft was completely white, according to Walski, and it had no windows, lights, or doors that he could see. However, protruding from the sides of the craft were 4 drill-like appendages that produced a humming sound. As he watched, stunned, a ramp lowered from the bottom of the craft. Walski felt compelled to climb in. As the ramp carried him up into the craft, a third creature was looking down at him from within and waving eagerly to him. The ship had a bland interior. The only items of note were some benches for the crew to relax on, and a medical instrument that was shaped like a couple of saucers. Walski was instructed to remove his clothes, which he did without protest. The aliens proceeded to examine him with the medical instrument. Walski makes no mention of the procedure causing him pain. When the procedure was done, Walski was told to put his clothes back on. The aliens then offered him some strange food, but he declined. Walski was then escorted off the ship. As Walski returned to his carriage, he looked back and said goodbye to the aliens, nodding farewell. The aliens returned the nod. Walski, no doubt confused by the ordeal, returned home and reported his experience to his family. Intrigued, a group of family members and neighbors trekked down to the spot where Walski had his encounter. But when they reached the location, the craft and its occupants were gone. The investigators had a look around and discovered some flattened grass where the ship had landed, and what appeared to be trails made by humans in the grass. Years later, in 2005, a monument was constructed in Emelsin, Walski's hometown, in remembrance of that historical day back in 1978. Every year on May 10th, the same date of Walski's abduction, if you can even call it that, hundreds of believers gather at the monument to pay respect. I find this particular abduction story, if you can even call it that, to be very interesting because there is no mention of any experimentation or torture going on, which is typical for abduction stories nowadays. You know, the classic Hollywood depiction of an abduction involves experimentation and medical instruments, probes, needles, things like that. But there's no mention of any of that in this story. There was a small procedure which involved a medical instrument that was shaped like a couple of saucers, but I think that was much more of a examination than an actual experiment, as if the aliens were just curious regarding human anatomy. What's also interesting is that Walski did everything willingly or voluntarily. I guess you could make the argument that maybe there was some kind of mind manipulation going on that made him more willing to participate, but he makes no mention of anything like that in the official report. He did everything willingly. He didn't seem the least bit afraid or intimidated by the creatures. But of course, it's entirely possible that Jan Walski made the whole thing up for fame, or he hallucinated. Maybe he even hallucinated the whole experience. Regardless, I think it's a very interesting case, as it's definitely not your typical alien abduction story. But let me know what you think in the comments of this story down below, because I'd be interested to hear your opinions. In the meantime, though, thank you for joining us here on Everything Cryptic. I hope you enjoy the video, and be sure to like the video and subscribe, and check us out on Instagram for daily creepy posts.